I want to bring in Major Glenn Ignacio, retired U.S. Air Force Special Operations Commander and President of Limiting Factors, LLC. Good to have you with us this morning. Let's start with the significance of the city of Lyman. How important is this for Ukraine's strategy at this point in the war?
It's actually very good. So Lyman was really a center for logistics and communications for the Russians. So this was one of the areas that was completely surrounded by the Ukrainians and really caused the Russians to withdraw actually rather quickly. So being a center of logistics and communication, it's a significant blow because, of course, communications is so critical as far as keeping your forces organized and executing there on the border.
What areas do you think will be next? I mean, potentially the port cities because of their importance?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big focus right now on the Donetsk and the whole Donbass area. So we're seeing the forces pull back there. I mean, from the standpoint of the hits and the damage that has been done to the Russian military, we see them sort of pulling back and trying to pull together and reorganize. So they're going to really focus in the southeast areas. We've seen from the north-south of Kharkiv, which Kharkiv was taken over by the Ukrainians, and we're also seeing the Ukrainians push into Kherson, which is in the southwest. So that is sort of enveloping the Russians more to the southeast and the Donbass areas, and I think that's where they're really going to focus right now.
What is happening on the battlefield that is allowing the Ukrainians to overtake Russian forces specifically? Is it manpower? Is it equipment and weaponry?
It's a combination of both. So the Russians are really preparing, or at least they have to prepare on the Ukrainians as well, because the winter is coming. The winter is fierce. So there's been a lot of pullback where the Russians have been completely dominated. That's mainly been from the firepower that has been provided by the U.S. and NATO. At the same time, the major hits of very poorly trained troops of the Russians have been dominated by the Ukrainians, and they're having significant losses. The thing that I have to really watch about for the Ukrainians is these incredible successes need to make sure they don't overextend themselves, because you can win the battle from combat and combat operations, but the true war is won by the logistics, and they can't overextend that. So the Ukrainians really have to watch that in this particular game.
Right. I mean, you're talking about a war of attrition, right? How do they win the long game? Thinking down the road, this could go on for years.
It could. And I mean, it really depends. I mean, you have this annexation, which, the propaganda within the country of Russia is always about, we're just trying to protect Russia, and we're being attacked by the West. So this annexation makes it look like, oh, that's Russian territory. So it plays the propaganda internally. But Putin lost that significantly with trying to pull up 300,000 troops and started maintaining that there's something really wrong in that war. So it's really going to be a pullback down there. And we do have to watch the ports. Those are the most critical for Ukraine. That's their economic well-being. So that's always going to be one of those things to really keep attention on.
You brought up NATO just a moment ago. There is a continued, more intense push for Ukraine to join NATO. Do you think that that will happen sooner than later? And how does that further antagonize Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, that's really in contention right now. The reason for it was the whole idea of Ukraine becoming a member of NATO being a complete surrounding threat to Russia. That was one of also the negotiating paths of Ukraine and Russia sort of coming to a truce, was we won't go to NATO and sort of deal with it that way. The part that's very difficult, and people have to understand, is if they become a member of NATO, the Charter of NATO says if you attack one country, all countries will come to the defense. So all the NATO countries of Europe would have to come to the defense and engage in active operations against Russia within Ukraine. That's a significant escalation, and I'm not sure that most of the NATO countries are really ready for that.
All right. Important. We're at a critical point in this war, and we're seeing the momentum for Ukrainian forces. Major General Ignacio, retired U.S. Air Force Special Operations Commander, President of Limiting Factors, LLC. Good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you, Barney. Take care.
All right. Ahead for us here.